A very important mushroom, commercially grown mushroom, is the king oyster mushroom, and this is quite famous all over the world. In several countries that I've seen it in the supermarkets. I believe that this mushroom has a great shelf life of up to 2 weeks, 3 weeks even, when it's set at 4 degrees Celsius, pretty much the fridge temperature. And I want to tell you that it has a great texture. It has a meaty texture, and I believe that this is a wonderful substitute for meat. Especially it can be consumed by vegetarians, but also it has a very unique taste, and especially I would notice here some of the varieties that this mushroom species complex includes, because some of its varieties are very, very flavorful and very tasty. And I would say that the variety Ferule that I had, it's probably one of the tastiest oyster mushroom that I ever had in my life. So I would encourage you to try different varieties, to grow different varieties, and then to cook them up and see what the differences in taste are, because if you'll compare this mushroom to the common oyster mushroom, you will see some differences in taste, but also in texture and shelf life and so on. But also when you'll try this particular mushroom, which is the Eringi variety of Pleurotus eringi, with some other varieties from the same complex, then you will see differences in what means flavor, especially flavor, because the texture, it's pretty much the same. It has a meaty texture. It's a robust fruit body kind that this mushroom has. So let's dive a little bit into description, taxonomy, and common names for this fungus. It's called king oyster, or Xingbao Gu in Chinese. But mostly you will see it across the states as king oyster or trumpet mushroom as well. In some cases that's more like a secondary name for this mushroom though. It has a light brownish cap. Sometimes on this on its cap, when it's mature especially, you can see some darker stripes. The cap forms a kind of central depression, or it can have a central umbo. This is how it's called. It's a bump, a little bump, and you can see from this picture that the gills are running down the stem. This is a term in mycology that's called decurrent onto the stipe. The gills are white or cream colored towards ochre. Now the stalk, you can see that it's white, it's robust, it's solid. It means that it's not hollow inside, and it doesn't have a ring. The flesh, it's white and it's flavorful, and also the spore prints is white. If you're thinking about taxonomy, now as I already said, this species belongs to a complex. A complex, it means that there are different other mushrooms that are very closely related to this particular one, and they cannot really be differentiated into distinct species necessarily, because there are characteristics overlapping, especially when you check this particular mushroom and you compare it to some other considered varieties under the microscope. You will see a lot of overlapping characteristics, but you will see differences in what means color, geographical region or occurrence. You will see differences in habitat, in growth rate, and so on. For example, the ferule and the nebrodensis varieties, they can be cultivated as well, and until from the start point when you put up your substrate until the mushroom fruits, it can take over 100 days. So there's a huge difference between this Aringi variety, which you can see it popping after like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, starts to pop. Yeah, so there are some differences from this point of view, but also differences what means. I'm thinking here about the variety nebrodensis, for example, which is known to grow in Sicily, in southern Italy, but you can find it in some other parts of the world, according to my knowledge. So that's where it's found, and that's why it's called variety nebrodensis. Now, this grows as a saprophyte, also a facultative parasite with some random herbaceous plants. This particular mushroom likes the cold, so can be grown in random, even in warmer climates. Let's say if you want to grow this in Israel, for example, or in California, of course you can, but just pick the right season for it. Don't try to grow it in the summer, in hot weather, for example. Of course, there are some strains that are tolerant to hot weather, and those are especially native to some of the Mediterranean countries, for example. But this fungus grows also in Asia. It's found in temperate European countries, and also in the Mediterranean countries. So depends what variety you want to grow, and depends where did you pick that mushroom from, because if you pick it in a rather cold climate, then you should adapt the temperature according to the needs of that particular strain. The mycelium, when it grows on a agar medium, it's white, it's cottony, it's pretty much like cotton swabs. It's dense, and it has a fragrance. The fragrance is quite intense. It's pretty much like what you see in the common oyster mushroom. But this one, it's a little bit slower in growth if you compare it to the common oyster. So yeah, as you see in this picture, it can be grown on straw as well, but you have to supplement that straw if you want to get more fruit bodies. In this case, for example, if you see, it was a 5-pound bag of straw, and it yielded only 2 bigger medium-sized fruit bodies. Yeah, let's go a little bit further, and let's talk about substrate. Now, it can be grown on a wide variety of substrates, probably not as wide as for the substrates that it's preferred by the common oyster mushroom, but of course this one is a very good candidate for different kinds of substrates, like hardwood sawdust, which is mostly used on straws in combinations, sometimes with hardwood sawdust, different straw types. Make sure if you're going to use rice straw, for example, make sure that that you're going to break that down, because you need to rice straw has a impermeable layer, if you'll see that, and you have to break that down before soaking or disinfection, because that's going to retain moisture, so it needs to be broken down. And of course grows on paper, agricultural wastes, cotton wastes, even on conifers. According to Stamets, this mushroom grows, some of the strains of this mushroom grows on conifers. Personally, I never grew it on conifers, but looks like some other people did. So play around with strains if you really want to grow this on conifers, and see if your strain is suitable for the conifer substrate that you have around in abundance. Also, this mushroom requires supplementation, and this is essential, because if you're not going to use supplements, you're not going to get yields. For example, you can compare, take a bag, fill it with straw, add this spawn to it, and then grow it that way, and then supplement another bag with some rice bran or flour or something, and see the difference. And then you'll notice and you'll observe that this mushroom loves very much if its substrate is nutritious. According to Dai et al., he observed that the carbon nitrogen rate should be somewhere between 35 parts to 1 part. So this doesn't need a lot of nitrogen. And here you can see few simple recipes. Now you'll see also that the spawning rate, it's a little bit higher than in some other mushrooms. For example, in Volvariella it's used 2%. In oyster mushroom, in the common oyster mushroom, it's also used 2 to 3%. In some cases 5%, but if you go with 2%, it's fine. In this case you can use a little bit more, because as I said, it loves nutrients. So even spawn, it's a supplement, functions as a supplement in this case. So also you can combine hardwood sawdust with rice bran, or wood shavings with hemp waste, for example, and then you can add the supplement to it. Here's a study reported by Dai et al. In 2015. The authors used 60% cotton waste with 20% wheat bran and 3% straw and 10% maize flour and soy flour together. What they observed is that the substrate got colonized very quickly, and the fruit bodies were looking great. Now, but this also triggers a high contamination rate, and that's the downside of it, because see, this recipe here contains a lot of nutritious ingredients. So if you're going to use nutritious ingredients in there, make sure that you pasteurize it well, or you sterilize that substrate. If you're not going to use that much nutrients in the substrate, then you can just pasteurize or even soak the substrate in some bath lime. Let's see in here. So the containers used for the cultivation of this mushroom are usually bottles. This is commercially grown in polypropylene bottles. They weigh 850 grams each, and the substrate is put in there together with the supplement, and it's sterilized in a huge autoclave, and when it comes out, then it's cooled, and after that it's inoculated with the mushroom. And before it's inoculated, actually it's in the center of the bottle. It's made a kind of space in which which is going to be inoculated with spawn, and then that's going to sit in the incubation room until fruiting. Okay, it's also grown in plastic bags, in containers, or even trays. As I said, it may be pasteurized, sterilized, or the substrate can be left in a lime bath for several hours. But if you're a beginner and you're just starting out to grow this mushroom, I would recommend you not to supplement the substrate at all with anything. Just pasteurize it. Let's say that you're picking sawdust, alder sawdust, okay? Then what you do, it's you can mix that with 2% gypsum, with 2% hydrated lime, and then you can pasteurize that for 2 hours. And then as a supplement, you can use more spawn, let's say 20%. And you can place that in a container. Could be a plastic bag or some kind of container. And that's pretty much it. You can use a casing layer on top after the whole substrate is colonized or not. There are some studies that say that if you're going to use a casing layer, that aids the grower, just because it's going to provide him with some more yields. I believe that using a casing layer, it's important just because if you don't have a grow room which is well equipped, and you don't have plenty of moisture or humidity in your grow room, then it's better if you're going to use a casing layer. Otherwise, you don't have to use that, because it's not going to make a huge difference. There are some standard methods according to which this is grown. They're using usually supplement somewhere between 15 and 25%, usually rice bran or wheat bran, but also soy, or even 30% they're using. So it's one of the mushrooms that I've saw that many authors are using more supplement than in some other cases. The substrate is sterilized primarily, especially when you're using so much supplement. You have to sterilize it. You can also pasteurize it, but that's not going to warranty you that you're not going to get any contaminants in the substrate. If you're not going to use much supplement, then you can even try to use to soak this in a lime bath. But if you're going to use that much supplement, don't even think about using a lime bath. The spawning rate, it's in this case is 2 to 3%. They are using polypropylene containers or plastic bags. They're growing this in blocks, 5-pound blocks usually, or in trays. In some cases they're adding hydrated lime to it. Sometimes they're not. Depends on the person or on the grower and its preferences. Usually they're adding gypsum, and in some cases they're using casing layer, but it's not a must, as I discussed. This mushroom is also grown on logs, or it can be cultivated in the garden together with some other plants. Now let me look a little bit more, and let's talk a little bit about incubation, fruiting, and harvest for this wonderful mushroom. I want to tell you that this is a quite quick mushroom to fruit. In like 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks from the point that you inoculated that substrate, you're going to get fruit bodies. Now for the incubation, just use a medium temp. You don't have to use too high or too low. Just the mycelium is going to run smoothly with a medium temp. Of course, after that you're going to have to lower the temperature up to 15 degrees Celsius or 60 Fahrenheit, and this is going to be very important if your strain it's a cold loving strain especially, but also in the warmer loving strains you have to decrease the temp, because that's going to stimulate fruit body production and you're going to get more fruit bodies. The duration of the pinning is around 5 days. Now depends when you want to harvest this mushroom. If you're going to harvest it while it's still young, then there will be some more nutrients left for secondary flush. If you are going to leave that mushroom to grow at the full maturity, to its full maturity, then you're not going to have enough nutrients left for the second flush. But what you can do, you can use delayed release nutrients. So this means that you can use more nutrients later. And if you're going to grow the cap to its maturity, then you can increase a little bit the temperature up to 70 Fahrenheit, and you can lower the humidity, but make sure that your mushroom is going to have plenty of humidity when it's pinning. Then is when the humidity should be high. So once you collect your first flush, then you'll have a break of 10 up to 14 days, and then you'll have a second flush. Of course, as I said, depends very much the amount that you're going to collect on when you harvested your first flush. The shelf life is very good. It's up to 3 weeks, I would say, if you keep it in the cold. And this is one of the mushrooms that comes first if you compare it to the common oyster mushroom. You know, after 2 weeks, if you look at the common oyster mushroom in the shelves of a store, it doesn't look that good, but this mushroom, even after 2 weeks, is going to look good. So that's a plus for this king oyster. Hints, well, prefers low temp depending on the strain, and it's a mushroom that loves moisture and loves also oxygen. Make sure that you give it plenty of oxygen, otherwise you'll see some weird shapes growing in there, long stems, small caps. If you're thinking about yield, now the yield range for this mushroom is somewhere between 50 and 100% biological efficiency. This means that from a pound of, let's say a pound of substrate, if you get a pound of mushroom, dry substrate, then it's considered 100% biological efficiency. It's rare when people get to that amount of mushrooms. As I see, there are studies out there that didn't get to more than 100% BE. Here we have a couple of studies. For example, Stamets grew this on alder sawdust and 20% bran. He got 90% BE. Now we have some other people here. The second recipe here says that he got 93% BE. If this mushroom was grown on wheat straw with soybean waste in a proportion of 1:1, and to that was added 10% rice bran. And there are some other studies here. For example, as you see here, the last one says that they grew the mushroom in 850 ml polypropylene bottles, and they used kinkaki. Kinkaki, it's a technique, a Japanese technique of scraping the surface of the substrate after it's fully colonized. And that kinkaki, actually, it's been noticed that may increase yields. So in this case, the authors they formulated the substrate out of 70% oak sawdust and 25% wheat bran, and they got 108 grams per bottle, which is not a lot, but this is less than 100% B. Now, if you want good yields, consider the following. Try to use a casing layer. In a study by Estrada et al. In 2009, he observed that when you're using a casing layer, it increases the yield with 141%. Now, the casing layer may be formulated out of peat moss or peat moss in combination with soil, but you need to pasteurize that or even to sterilize that before you place it on over the fully colonized substrate. And of course, this mushroom loves supplements. As I said, you can combine casing layer with supplements and you might see even more yield. Make sure that you harvest this mushroom at a good stage, and then you'll be left with a second flush. If you don't want a second flush, you can harvest the mushroom when it's rather mature. And you can use also kinkaki if you want, but at least try it and see if it works for you. Now a little bit more about another study on yield. So here in this table you can see different combinations, or if you will, different recipes of straws in combination with millet straw and with rice bran at different proportions. Now the authors here, they observed some differences in biological efficiency and yield. And for example, you can see here that the yield was 84% 0.6% plus minus. When they used wheat straw with corn stalk in proportion 1:1, this means 50% to 50% one ingredient and the other, in combination with 20% rice bran. So take a look at this table, and just in case that you have more straws than sawdust or wood chips or wood-based substrate, and if you want to use straw to grow this mushroom, then make sure that you pay attention to some of the combinations here and see which one can help you to get more yields. And that's pretty much it for this particular mushroom. I definitely encourage you to try it out, and I believe that it's one of the coolest mushroom to grow if you want to go commercial. If you don't want to do any commercial activity, then just grow it and see, maybe you like it in your own kitchen. What else? Yeah, that's pretty much it.